Welcome to the Femsplainers. I'm Danielle Crittenden.
And I'm Christina Hoff Summers.
And it's season 3.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes, we started last May, so it hasn't been a year. Happy January, everybody.
Well, I'll drink to that. Oh, wait, this is supposed to be sober January?
No.
Oh, thank goodness.
No, it's not. That was sober October. Actually, we're going to start this podcast talking... You just slammed your drink down.
No, that was not me.
We're going to start this podcast as everybody's probably starting your year with all these, trying to make good on your resolutions. So about health, about fitness, about drinking. And I've got really good news for those of you who are deciding that you want to get thin or lose weight, get in shape, because you may be accused of thin privilege if you lose too much weight. Right, Christina?
That's right. It's a new oppression category of those who are not thin, and those who are thin are benefiting from unearned privilege. But I take exception to that. I mean, the times that I've been thin, well, except when I was young and smoked all the time, and, you didn't have to make an effort. But if I'm thin, it's because of misery and suffering and self-denial.
Well, it says, this comes from an article that was in the BBC, and thin privilege is defined as not dealing with fat shaming when you tuck into a pizza. Now, I think this is very serious, Christine. I don't think you're taking this seriously enough. That, given the problems in life and the discrimination, it's just unfair that if you're obese,
somebody are thin,
and they give you a kind of side glance as you tuck into a pizza.
Well, but why is it only thin privilege? I mean, what about height privilege or youth privilege? Now, I resent youthfulness.
I do too.
I mean, I don't really, but I could.
No, but I mean, I resent that, for example, when I'm out with my 27-year-old daughter.
Yes.
I suddenly get way better service than I do if I'm on my own.
Yeah.
Cars stop when she's walking across the street. Yes. It's awesome. I love it. But then the minute she's gone, it's back to, what did Germaine Greer call it? Being invisible as a slightly older woman.
You know what cures that is have just a cute little dog, and you're the center of attention. I'm just saying.
No, the dog is the center of the attention, and maybe that's
multi-poo privilege.
Yeah, multi-poo privilege. But so one of the women who started this, her name is Cora Harrington, and her Twitter name is @lingerieaddict. So you might want to look. I guess you don't need to look thin in lingerie.
It helps.
It says, hey, you don't have to feel thin to have thin privilege. Thinness isn't a feeling. If other people perceive you as thin, you are thin. And if you are able to walk into any clothing store and expect to see a wide range of options in your size, you are thin. And that's somehow unfair.
Yeah, I think it's a kind of strange indulgence and self-absorption. And it's unfortunate. I feel bad for people who are overweight. And at any time I try to lose weight, it's painful and nearly impossible. So I sympathize, having been mildly overweight myself. But I don't consider it a privilege when I'm thin. I work hard for it.
Well, I think that people don't appreciate that if you're trying to maintain a healthy lifestyle, it's not fun. You do deny yourself food all the time.
All the time.
You do deny yourself
alcohol.
Treats. Alcohol.
How is that a privilege?
How is that a privilege? And but yet, if you don't deny yourself, if you are obese for reasons that go to your lifestyle and diet, don't want to shame anybody with issues that cause you to gain weight, you have greater health problems. So this isn't about privilege and non-privilege. In fact, there was a man named Ethan. Oh, his Twitter handle. Ethan, you need better self-esteem, dude. His Twitter handle is Ethan Peter is lame @I'm only mediocre.
Oh.
This poor guy.
Poor Peter. Or he maybe just not care.
But he said something. He says he is overweight. He says, but don't feel bad for us. Sure, there are things that we don't always agree with, but there are much more important issues at hand, including racism, LGBT and discrimination, sexism, and others. We can change our situation if we want. Those others cannot.
Yeah.
Ethan, you're not only mediocre.
Yeah, he sounds like a nice guy. But I do think there's, for example, a lot of discrimination against men who are short or who are bald, and they can't do much about it.
That's true.
And we can make a fuss about it, but we don't. You don't hear much about it, and no one feels sorry for them, but they do suffer from discrimination.
The only time I would shame a short man is when he wears a bow tie. Short men should not wear bow ties.
Okay.
You know what comes to mind? Dapper little fellow.
Oh.
I can't help it. So, I'm sorry for that. But fashion tip.
But I do think people should just lighten up. And, the biggest privilege of all is like health privilege.
Yes. That's
a privilege. If you're healthy overall, you're graced. And the other is how would we characterize this? Living in this century at this time is like temporal privilege. To have been born in a previous century and the ways you would suffer.
I love that temporal privilege.
We all have temporal, but we're lucky to be, for the most part, almost all of us, just the availability of dental care. And air conditioning.
Well, one of my husband David, who, as you know, loves history, he once said to me that one of the ways to understand history is to remember that every single person you read about had the equivalent of a toothache all the time. They were constantly in pain for things that
and no air conditioning. Had to sleep all night after night. In muggy weather, poor heating systems, and dying.
Dirt floors. Floors. So everybody, feel grateful. Feel grateful
for your temporal privilege. And I think after a certain age, being thin is an achievement.
Also, don't be too thin as you get older. Otherwise,
you can't be too thin.
As we get older, we can look kind of skeletal.
Yes. Catherine Deneuve, the French beauty, said that at a certain age, a woman has to choose between her face and her ass. If you have a thin ass, you're going to look like an old
I almost said, what if you
woman.
can't tell the difference? But that would be really rude.
No, that's true.
All right. Here's another thing to think about this January. You were asking if there was like some sober January. There isn't, although it would make sense to have sober October right now.
Yeah.
There is the rise of January.
All right. I don't like these neologisms. I want to have a January-free month. I mean, a month free of made-up words. And this one's too awful. I'm not even going to repeat.
I'm going to say what it is. And it also comes from England. What is going on over there?
Yeah. With that, England.
Okay. So Laura Jackson, 21, from Warwickshire, started the January campaign. Women from around the world show off their unshaven armpits and stubbly legs. She started it to help women love and accept their natural hair while raising money for charity, similar to a female version of Movember. So obviously you grow it on your legs, your armpits, and I guess if you can, on your face, like the famous bearded lady of the circus. But
yeah.
Otherwise we're discriminated against in Movember.
Again, what a misbegotten cause. Laura Jackson, go ahead. No one cares. But leave the rest of us alone.
Actually, some people might care, like
guy
she
her
dated.
boyfriend. Well, he might like it. I will say that back in my day, there was not the waxing that we have now. Mm-hmm. And suddenly it was the fashion, and I found out about it when I was traveling around the world with students, and they were all, by then, waxing. and this friend of mine, who was this young woman on the ship, she just pointed out to me that maybe that could be an issue because we were in the shower. The ship had the shower, and I had no idea after that.
Well, actually, when this story came out, we tweeted from our account that January is no good for women or men if you live through the 70s. Do you remember how, we've talked about this before, how hairy everybody was?
Yeah.
The idea that heterosexual men would wax their backs or wax their chest. I mean, just
go look at the nude
unheard
photos from Woodstock. people were hairy, men and women.
and so I think, maybe there is overwaxing, and maybe actually this is a healthy reaction to yes, times have gone so far that we can't stand the sight of any hair. But I'm sorry. I remember the French women. Do you remember in the south of France if you were there when you were a young woman, and they'd all not shave their armpits, and you'd go and they'd say, "Oh, this is what we do. It is French," and you'd say, "Oh, that's disgusting. Not everything the French do is great.
Worth imitating."
Yeah, you women can sure tie scarves.
The naked women were sort of the wrong women to be naked at the beach, except in Greece. It was Swedish women playing volleyball.
Well, what is this? I guess the theme of this is it's like everything, you should be able to do whatever you want appearance-wise, and it's turned into a kind of right as opposed to
no.
A
but this is what's absurd. No one is taking away that right. You can do it. You're free to do it. Now, there are other people who want to look their best, and we do associate beauty with youthfulness, and so being less hirsute and hairy it makes most people more attractive by contemporary standards. And so
but we also have and standards of beauty change.
Yes, they could change. It could go back to being a little hairier. But I don't think there's ever going to be a time where people want to see hair on women's faces.
Well, right. But I mean, if you went in the 50s or the 16th century, you think of Sophia Loren from the 1950s, and you look at the paintings from the 16th, 17th centuries where everybody, the beautiful women, are fat, that standards change. So we may be angry that thin privilege is kind of the fashion of the moment.
Right.
But look, Beyonce and the Kardashians with their tiny waists and their enormous behinds are creating a whole new body model.
Yeah, but then there's like shapely behind privilege.
Yeah, that's right.
And I want to go back in the 60s. It was
privilege.
Twiggy privilege. You could be tall and skinny, flat. You just had to have cute legs.
But yeah,
what happened to that?
Well, I think it's the force. It becomes a quote unquote right when they're just trying to force the acceptance of I'm allowed to do whatever I want. And you just have to not only accept it, you can't just ignore it. You have to affirm it.
Well,
and that's
I'm not
what
going
sort
to affirm your hairy armpits. I'm sorry. Because to me, it just looks unkempt.
Yes. All right. Now, we talked about, for our new season, we've had a lot of tips, which we thank you for writing in to tell us about. Tips, suggestions. One of the tips that was sort of doing segments where we do kind of a weekly thing, whatever. And you, Christina, who is always on Twitter, by the way, if you ever want to ask Christina to do something, you just go to her on Twitter because you know she'll get your message.
I'm there.
Christina wanted to do a tweet of the week every week, so we're going to do a tweet of the week. And Christina, you're in charge of that one.
Well, I tweeted, I'm going to cite my own tweet in this case, that I read about a study, and I said, I endorse this study. No replication necessary. And what it shows is that alcohol and coffee could be the key to living longer. Study finds. And
we always find, look, this happens every 6 months. We find a study saying it's great to drink coffee and drink alcohol and coffee. And then 6 months later, we're all going to die early.
Right.
And then 6 months again, this comes out. I'm just going to drink coffee and drink and
just do what you want, because sooner or later some study
all going to
endorse it. But this says people who drink moderate amounts of alcohol and coffee, and you can be a little overweight. You can do this in middle age. You live longer.
Not so heavy privilege, little bit heavy privilege.
Yeah,
slightly overweight.
This kind of describes me, just slightly overweight. And the researchers started a study in 2003. What helps people live to age 90? Coffee, drinks, alcoholic drinks, and snacks.
There was a famous Canadian novelist named Robertson Davies.
Yes.
Okay. And he began his career in a small regional newspaper in Ontario, Canada. And he was the most hated assignment that he had was he would be sent out to interview the oldest person of the town, whoever that was, and unfailingly someone who had gotten to 90 or 100. And he said, you could just write this story in advance. What did you do? I never smoked a day in my life / 6-pack a day. I never drank / I drank every day.
Right. There was no consistency.
There was no consistency. And I think a lot is genetics, but I think you should.
Everything in moderation.
Everything in moderation. All right. So we have a great cocktail. Also, this is part of our new segments. We're going to call it our guests we're having cocktails with. And this week, we're having cocktails with Leah McSweeney, who has written an incredible article for Tablet called Is the Women's March Melting Down? And it's a real expose of what happened to the Women's March.
An amazing story. She co-authored it with Jacob Siegel, and it's just a fantastic example of investigative journalism. I mean, she really got into the meltdown of the Women's March, the failures in leadership.
Well, also the rumors that came out that there was incredible anti-Semitism, that Farrakhan was somehow got connected to it.
Yes, not just connected. 3 of the leaders appear to be followers of Louis Farrakhan.
Right.
Or, and one of them in particular. And there's questions about the finances, and it was just a power grab by a group of...
kind of hijacked by activists.
Activists.
You can't even call them left-wing. They were just radical activists, basically.
Radical, just bizarre personalities. And the movement was taken over, almost stolen. It was kind of just stolen from the people who started it. And it's mismanaged. And now people, they've defended themselves and said, oh, well, it's coming from the right wing. No, some of the harshest criticism is coming from women who are part of it.
And original founders
Original
of it.
founders.
And this whole concept of it being, as it was, this organic, popular, wonderful moment post-Trump's election seems to have been squandered. But we're going to bring Leah in, and Leah herself is super interesting, and we'll talk to her about that as well. Yes. But let's bring in Leah for a drink.
These boots are made for walking, and that's just what they'll do. One of these days, these boots are gonna walk all over you.
Welcome to the podcast, Leah.
Thanks for having me, guys.
So great to have you. One of the things we always ask, and it's really actually probably the most important question we're going to ask of you, really the most hard-hitting, I think.
Yes, this is tough. Prepare.
This is tough. What is your favorite cocktail?
Oh, my God. This is such a complicated question, and you guys are going to be so disappointed in me because I know you both love to drink.
Don't tell me you don't drink. You were such a wild girl in high school.
Listen, I know, but this is the thing. I was a little too wild, so I have not had a drink in almost 9.5 years.
Wow. Impressive.
It's crazy.
Okay.
But I did a lot of drinking.
Okay, mocktail. It's January. People are trying to cut back. What is your favorite mocktail?
But listen, I mean, I loved a good glass of, Chianti. And I loved my vodka and sodas. And I loved my champagne with Chimboard. So
that's a Kir Royale.
That's Chris.
But you're not drinking them now. That's why you have thin privilege. We talked about that before.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
You know what? When I stopped drinking, I lost so much weight that people thought I was sick.
Oh, this is what I want. But I want to do it without stopping the alcohol.
What was
people?
Sorry.
People were like, ask my sister, like, is your sister okay? Because she looks really good. Oh, no, she just stopped drinking.
What was that line in Devil Wears Prada of, I'm only one stomach flu away from my perfect dress size?
Yeah.
You gotta love a good stomach flu.
I'm always happy to have a stomach flu for that reason.
It's not, that's the upside. And it's also the upside of being very stressed out.
Yeah.
My body tends to look sick, like really sick.
Well, bravo on the sobriety. Although, we'll come up with a mocktail in your honor,
or a Shirley Temple. You can have a Shirley Temple.
You can sit at the kids' table. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Anyway, let's get to your amazing article.
Fantastic investigative reporting, you and Jacob.
And this was in Tablet, let us stress.
It was in Tablet, and then it led finally to other news organizations like the New York Times, et cetera, acknowledging that there was deep malaise at the heart of the Women's March. Just sort of boil it down and tell us in succinct way, because it's a complicated...
Yeah, I had trouble following all the names, and you realize when you get into this murky world of professional activists,
oh my God.
It does. I hope it's not unfair to say it does seem like a real, maybe racket is the wrong word, but it's a real.
No, I think that's the right word.
Yeah.
Yes, it is the right word.
So tell us, just
us
sort of break
the
it
story.
Down.
Yeah. Well, I think when I was always kind of skeptical. I'm a skeptical person to begin with, but I'm very skeptical when I see very self-righteous people. When I see very self-righteous, rigid people, they seem very extreme to me. Nothing really made sense. And when all my friends were going off to the march and, I was like, I don't know about this. Like, I'm all about girl power, but this seems like, I don't know, leaving out, pro-life women and conservative women. Like, this isn't really like feminism to me. And, fast forward to when Teresa Shook, who was the woman who originally came up with the idea for the march, when she finally came out, around
stress, she was an ordinary woman, right, or like a lawyer in Hawaii, and she put it up on Facebook like, hey, we should march, and got this incredible organic...
It was her idea.
Her idea, right.
Yes, and Teresa Shook is a woman who, she's a retired lawyer who has spent her life traveling to disadvantaged, third world countries to teach people English, she's helped, domestic abuse survivors. Like, she's like a wonderful, wonderful human being. She put this out on Pantsuit Nation, which was a Facebook group that I guess is like a pro-Hillary kind of Clinton Facebook page, I think. And it started like this idea started coming about. People were like, hey, I would march. So she sent out a call to action on Facebook. She woke up the next day with, 20,000, 30,000 RSVPs.
Wow.
And that's where, and I don't think the story was ever really told on how the women in the beginning really came to be, how these 4 co-chairs came to have those seats at the head of the Women's March. And really what happened is that, long story short, I mean, they wanted to be diverse. I think this group of white women said, hey, we need to not be like our past feminist movements, which always left out black women and didn't make them a voice, and we didn't think about the problems that they had. And the woman, Vanessa Rubel, went to this man named Michael Skolnick, who is a, social justice, civil rights activist,
entrepreneur,
connected to celebrity, which was sort of key.
Russell Simmons, ex-political director. That's probably a whole other article. Yeah, but he is the one who suggested, hey, I'm on a board of directors for Justice League, and I think you should work with these women. And so that's how they got into place. And I think even though there was the anti-Semitic remarks at that first meeting, I think, it
Can you
seems
just say, for people who haven't read the article,
yes.
So this group got together, and these are eventually the people who were featured on Time magazine, right? Carmen Perez, Tamika Mallory, Linda Sarsour,
and Bob Bland.
Who's a woman.
She's coming from a fashion background, and I come from a fashion background, so I understand her mindset was to trademark, was to buy the URL. She was thinking of it from a business standpoint because she had just made the Nasty Women T-shirts, and it's a big business.
So these women come together in an apartment in New York, and
actually a rooftop. But yes,
right. And Shook is not there, right? Like, I assume
Shook is not there because she's in Hawaii, and there's the time difference. And Bob Bland shut her Bob Bland got the new Facebook for the Women's March, and she took Teresa Shook's event page and deleted it. So they were deleting and erasing any little part of Teresa Shook they could.
Mm-hmm. So they just sort of seized on this and took it over. Because Skolnick had recommended them, and then they brought in they have this organization. Is it called Gathering for Justice?
Yeah,
that's the main one. Yeah,
the Gathering for Justice.
But to go to the anti-Semitism,
so they have their first meeting.
Right, they have their first meeting, and Linda Sarsour is
Linda Sarsour was not there. It was
it was Tamika
Mallory and Carmen Perez.
Yeah,
and allegedly. And according to now, Vanessa Rule came out and said that this did happen in the New York Times, first account record, that there was Jews bear a special responsibility for, the slave trade, for the exploitation of black and brown people. And it's straight out of, Louis Farrakhan's the secret relationship between blacks and Jews.
Oh, his 1991 book, which is completely a conspiracy theory about the Jews.
Satanic Jews have infected the whole world with poison and deceit.
So they come at her with these accusations. What does she do?
It seems like it seems as if she wanted to kind of get past that because she wanted this Women's March to work out. And really what it comes down to is people being so scared to criticize someone from another race, in this hypersensitive, politically correct, authoritarian kind of climate that we're in. It's like, there is no room for nuance. There is no room to criticize a white woman, to criticize, or a Jewish woman to criticize a black woman, or vice versa, or whatever. And I think that's really what it comes down to, is this obsession with intersectionality it's almost like mind numbing, right? It's like we can't think critically about somebody. We can't if you're a woman and you call out another woman, then you're an anti-feminist. If you're from another race and you call someone else out from another race on bad behavior, then you're a racist.
So they all just kind of went along, even though these women from the Gathering for Justice, Tamika Mallory and so forth, didn't seem to mind. They didn't hold back. They were.
Well, they were professionals. They moved in. They saw it sounds like a great thing. And I just want to step back and say just what a great thing that was. I mean, I remember my daughters. We were all moved by this incredible outpouring. And then you didn't get into this in your article. You wrote about the anti-Semitism, but you said just a few minutes ago, they banned the right to life women wanted to march. Conservative women wanted to march. And this was amazing. This was one of those great coming together as women. But they didn't let the right to life women. They excluded them. No, they excluded them. And that was the first sign I remember, just as a layperson watching this, that something was not right.
There was a mean girl element.
Well, or worse.
Much worse.
And then I remember Tina Brown, whom we love, had them on a Women in the World conference here in Washington. I think it was the three of them, Carmen, Tamika, and Linda. And they were so, can I just say, preening about how somebody did ask them, why didn't you allow the right to life women to march? And they were just like, well, we don't consider any woman who has that position as a woman. But it was one of those great nonpartisan coming together that as you write in such detail, got shut down.
Yeah.
And there were some weird things at the march. Remember Madonna's speech?
Did you see Ashley Judd?
Oh, my God. You just play that tape sometime of Ashley Judd's speech.
What did she say again?
I don't know. It was she was.
I don't know, but she looks unhinged.
It was demented.
Completely insane. What does she have to complain about? I mean, really, this is what I don't understand is a lot of these women getting up there and, I don't understand what they're really complaining about.
Yeah,
I don't know
about her lack of opportunities.
Well, I think she had I think she had a legit case about Harvey Weinstein.
Oh yeah, she did have that.
I think she did have that. But let's go back.
I don't know how Actually, I don't know. It just got dismissed in court.
I know. I mean, what is frightening to me, I don't want to digress, but frightening is maybe the wrong word, but the case against Harvey Weinstein seems to be falling apart a little bit.
It is.
Right?
Yeah, it seems like it.
Yeah.
Not a little bit. I mean, it seems, a lot of the charges got dismissed because it turned out that there was a lot of kind of corruption within the investigation and the DA, and the investigators didn't let one of the women, the investigators didn't let the DA know that one of the women who claimed that, he raped her or forced her to, give him oral sex or whatever, she admitted to her friend, I slept with him, to get a role. Mm-hmm. So my thing is like, yeah, I'm sure that did happen, but if there are the real victims of his, where are they? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right? And why aren't the investigators working with them instead of these women who clearly are not victims?
It does raise the question of women who went along with it and who, it's one thing if that one case that I thought was clear harassment was I think it was an Italian woman, and you see him just so aggressively pursuing her, and then I thought that it was her.
Oh, you mean the recording in the hallway?
Yes.
Yeah.
The recording, where he's like, please, like, don't embarrass me at the hotel.
Right, where he's just such a bully.
Right. And look, he had incredible power, and he had a classic sleeping couch. And
But let's face it, some women made a bargain with the devil and became like a girlfriend, and then it becomes questionable whether you can say that. Well, anyway,
we're digressing. So go back.
That's another episode, right?
Let's update. Okay, so the Women's March, very early on, like within days, it gets taken by these professional activists in New York, and as you say, they actually kind of fire Teresa Shook. They take over the Facebook page, and then there's these potentially really anti-Semitic things that are said. There are connections to Farrakhan. But anyway, the march goes off. It's a huge success, obviously. And then what happens
They
next?
make tons of money.
And they get tons and tons of money. So what? Let's follow the money.
They sold so much merchandise, and I am waiting for a follow-up article of someone who is going to follow the money, because there's a lot of questions, and, they came out with their, pretty, PDF of, here's our, financial statement, which was just, a kind of a one-sheet P&L that doesn't really say much. And it says that, hey, we're a 501c4. When we interviewed them, we asked if they had filed for a 501c3, which is, there's two different nonprofit organizations.
One can engage in political activism and the other can't, the 501c3.
501c3 cannot, right? But that's what the crowdfunding page needs to work with you can only be a 501c3.
Which is an activist crowdfunding page.
The Women's March is probably one of their biggest fundraiser, companies, and they raised over $2 million with a 501c4 tax ID number. And then when it finally came out, then they said, okay, well, we're also a 501c3. Well, if you have a 501c3 and a 501c4, like some giant companies do, like a Planned Parenthood, you have to have different board directors. Mm-hmm. Now, there are no different board directors. The women on that board are all, they are friends. They do not hold each other accountable, and they're all in it, for the same reasons, and no one's going to hold each other accountable.
And it didn't one of them, I think it was Tamika, suggest at one point that all of them get to have 2% of the money raised for the march?
So, Bob, according to...
We have to keep saying Bob is a woman.
Bob Bland.
Bob Bland seems like a shady figure.
No, it's just
she changed her name to Bob, and she keeps something odd about her.
I mean, she is definitely not bland. Go on. Sorry.
And she's come from the background, like I said, a fashion background, but she was working in the city to get grants for her business, and then she went out of business. So she got millions of dollars in grants, and that money was wasted. And fast forward, and so basically people that were questioning them got pushed out. There were women like Evie Harmon She got pushed out. Mercy Morganfield, she got pushed out.
All right, Mercy Morganfield. She's the daughter of Muddy Waters.
Yes.
Many years experience in the workplace, fundraising, very professional, an African-American woman. And she is horrified by what's happening with the funding and with the funds and the general management, right?
She's completely horrified. And she is so smart and so bright and makes such amazing points. I mean, it's incredible. And, you know, and instead these women are running the march. And quite frankly, I mean, the different chapters are stepping away.
Right. Well, the whole thing, am I right, Leah, that everything has fallen apart now? That
even the Washington, D.C. chapter, one of the biggest chapters.
Chapters started to edge away, or actually not, just drop the whole. So tell us about that.
Well,
so it turns out these activists hijack it. It's extreme. I'm trying to summarize it in a women's march for idiots, as it were. It's very sketchy. There's no real accountability for the money, and
they've patented everything.
And they patented everything.
They're actually in a trademark dispute with other women's march chapters. Yeah.
Listen, now you know what? I just want to remind you that Camille Paglia once said that the problem with women is that they can't get along. Somebody has to be diva, and she pointed out the difference between the female bands and the male bands, like the Rolling Stones, the Grateful Dead. They stay together no matter what. And
I don't know. The Beatles were kind of
but there was a woman. There were women that got There was never mind. Anyway, I digress.
I think actually you said in this article, I think you quoted maybe Morganfield of saying this is a stereotype of women that we start whispering campaigns,
gossiping, and then excluding.
Yeah.
Oh no, I think Sarsour was saying that women gossip because she was trying to. But Mercy Morganfield has said, and I think we did quote her in the article. But she said, it's this is female behavior. I want to sit at the cool table. I want to be cool. I want to be, and it's no, this is not a sorority. That's what she said. This is not a sorority. It's a movement, and you've got to call people out when they're doing bad stuff.
Well, let's talk about the bad stuff. Let's talk about the way several of them, at least 2 or 3 of them, embraced Louis Farrakhan.
Who has very old-fashioned ideas about women's place.
Not only about Jews, comparing Jews to termites.
But about women in the home.
But calling, he's homophobic. He is sexist.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Women must not dress provocatively.
And was it Tamika who was showing up at his rallies and saying it's all okay?
Well, she is a disciple.
Yeah.
I mean, she truly is. There are multiple photos on her Instagram, and I don't know if they're still there, but someone sent me an entire folder of them that pictures of him, reposting him, praising him.
Calling him the GOAT. The greatest of all time.
Is that what
goat
means?
Yes, that's what
the thing is. My type of feminism, it's do whatever you want. Praise whoever you want. But the difference is, if you want people to be understanding of this complicated relationship you have with Minister Farrakhan because of what he's done for Black communities, I understand it. I'm willing to give you that understanding, but then you don't give the understanding to someone else, like a poor, white woman in Texas who votes conservative. You're calling her the devil.
Mm-hmm.
So if you expect someone to give you an understanding of a complex kind of situation and your own very personal individual experience, how come you're not extending the same kind of understanding? And that's total hypocrisy.
And I will say it's kind of hard to understand, a modern feminist, a leader of a movement, supporting Louis Farrakhan. It's as if they were supporting someone like Lyndon LaRouche. Who, and he was also anti-Semitic. And someone could say, the LaRouche, Institute provides pancake breakfasts for orphans or something. They're also
Linda
crazy.
Sarsour, Linda Sarsour, I mean, look, I don't really find arranged marriages to be in line with my type of feminism, but again, and Linda Sarsour is in an arranged marriage, and that's her.
Whoa, wait,
choice.
what? That wasn't in your article?
No, I know that wasn't, but she is in an arranged marriage, and there's videos of her talking about it on YouTube and everything, and I respect that. That's her culture. That's her religion. She gets to do, and
did Time magazine know that?
but if you are leading a progressive feminist movement, then I don't understand how that it goes in line with each other. I don't get it.
Well, let me ask you this, Leah. You have this wonderful quote from Mercy Morganfield that says, it's at the end of your article, it says, dealing with all this disillusionment and fallout, she said, "This needs to be a blip in our radar. We don't have to call it the Women's March. I think we still have an opportunity to pull this together. But it can't be the Jewish women's movement or Black women's or white women's or Spanish women's movement. We need women voting together." That's kind of what happened at the midterms. And what do you see as the future?
Is the Women's March dead?
How do you take that incredible momentum, and despite everything about the inner circle of the Women's March, how do you take that momentum and keep it going?
You know what? I think that the record-breaking number of women that got elected had nothing to do with those 4 women.
Yeah. Right.
It has nothing to do with them, really. I mean, they're the ones profiting from the march, but they're not really the voice of women. I mean, clearly. I mean, they're really not.
You know what they are? Is sort of photogenic and woke.
The wonderfully diverse woke face of the Women's March.
They look the part, so you would cast them, but
it's like they look like the Spice Girls,
Yes.
It's like intersectional, like Spice Girls. I mean, there's one for everyone. There's Bob,
right.
Linda in a hijab. And they're all they dress very nice, and they have their makeup done and their hair done, and it's been a pretty package, But it's not what it looks like. That's the whole issue, is that it's really not what it looks like. And shame on the media. Yeah. Shame on the media, and shame on these giant corporations and companies trying to just grasp at seeming woke and looking intersectional, and in turn letting these women who have these really kind of regressive and not progressive beliefs profit from everything.
Well, Leah, let me ask you to that, because this was, as we said at the beginning, a great piece of investigative journalism. I don't see this all over the place. Has it?
Oh, no, it
has.
It has.
Been
New York Times picked it up. The Daily Beast has been there, and then several times.
Okay, so this is just my own,
But
it has not. You would think that. I mean, journalists were sharing this all over social media, and very few publications actually picked it up. People don't want to look at this because it's really ugly. It's really ugly. And if these publications have all been worshiping these women, and then how are they going to now publish this? Right. Which says, "Hi, journalists, you've not been really doing your job."
But the New York Times, I thought, did a good job.
Yes, they did.
And I would say the Daily Beast.
Yes.
But who else?
But it's
Time magazine made these leaders. Did they make them Women of the Year or something?
Yeah, they made them.
They were on Glamour. They were on the cover of Glamour.
And Glamour has not. That's, I assume.
No, they're just going to brush it under the rug and forget about it.
But so it's just to go back to my question to you. So where do we go from here, as it were? Is there hope?
That's a really good question.
Is Mercy going to come forward? Is there? I mean, I guess the momentum is maybe gone. We're sort of looking. Maybe 2019 is the year of reckoning.
I doubt there can be a movement that unifies half of the population.
Yeah,
I mean,
it was so inspiring when it happened. It really was.
Yeah.
And Me Too, I think that kind of inspired us to start this podcast, just to revisit this incredible seismic change in women's issues that didn't seem to follow, ideology or politics. And now
brought,
we're looking
it brought
at the fallout.
Yeah, the Women's March, what I liked about it and what I liked about Me Too in the beginning was that it brought together women across the political spectrum.
Right.
And just as someone who studied the history of the women's movement, that's when women make progress, when radical and conservative women bury their differences and form an alliance. And that's when you get just seismic
change, right? And that's not what's happening, to me, what's happening is there's the divide between radical and conservative, or whatever you want to call those two sides of the spectrum. There is a bigger gap that's getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah, well, that's thanks to intersectionality.
Right. The gap between.
No, and people like me, I don't know what to do or where to go or what I identify.
But where's the gap? Sorry.
The gap between, conservative and
liberal women.
Liberal or radical, as you said, or whatever those two ends of the spectrum are. I feel like the gap is just getting bigger and bigger, and women are not coming together and forgetting about those differences. It seems like the gap is just becoming bigger to me.
Yeah, we're all going back to our bunkers. Okay, but let's talk about something fun.
Let's talk about you.
Let's talk about you.
Because tell us a little bit about your background.
And your fashion.
I saw, for example, that you were, there was an article in Slate by a...
Oh, yes.
You'd ruffled the feathers of some feminists, and they were concerned. Like, you have an article, you write for Penthouse.
This is where all the edgy writing is going. Do you notice how many guests we've had
from Penthouse, from the
columns
world?
For Penthouse. No, they have columns. This is where they
because this is where I think the free thinkers are.
Right.
And because if you go inside the sort of gender activist world,
right,
that
you get the article.
You get dogmatism and hyper Puritanism. And I find the freest thinkers are ending, people like Penthouse. I think it's wonderful. Slate was very concerned.
Thank God for Penthouse, and like we said earlier, I have a fashion background, and my day job is running my clothing line, which is what I've been doing for
Married
14
to the mob.
years. Married to the mob, yes. And when I started the brand when I was 22, it was always like my message was always, without even really knowing that it was kind of feminist or, it was, because I had my own views, and not from, not an academic, nothing like that, but more like just my experience going through the world and the music I listened to and the women I looked up to, like Heidi Fleiss and Oprah and Lil' Kim. They kind of shaped my views around feminism. And when I started the brand, it was definitely, within this culture and the streetwear community where there were no other girl brands, and I was dealing with men all the time, and there was, like I said, there was no other female brands that were in that culture. So my voice was always, and my message was always kind of a commentary on dealing with things like that. And it was always like very pro-sex, I am super pro-sex, and like, and that is kind of my issue with a lot of the feminism right now is it is so puritanical and
dear, it's always been that way.
Has it? That's so scary to me.
Go back to Andrea Dworkin. It's just
right.
No, I know, but Andrea Dworkin and Catherine McKinnon, they lost the debate. And we won. The pro-sex feminists won. And Leah is an example of someone who must, maybe, I don't know if she read me or Camille Paglia or whatever.
Both of you, yeah.
Oh, thank you, dear. And then they've crept back and made a power play, and now they own feminism. We have to take it back again.
Really...
What kind of backlash, if any, have you had?
Oh, well, today I'm dealing with some drama because I started a YouTube series called Me Neither with Nancy Rommelman, who's an author and journalist, and her husband owns a coffee shop in Portland, and an ex-employee, a disgruntled ex-employee, found our videos, which us talking just like we are right now, frankly and honestly, about the Women's March and ASIA and feminism, and this woman has now kind of started a smear campaign and is trying to have people boycott Nancy's husband's coffee company in Portland. And it's kind of working because a wholesale account dropped him and newspapers are writing about it in Oregon. I mean, I can't believe that this is what people put their energy into.
Right, I have contacts in Portland. So after the show, you tell me the name of it.
Speaking of Married to the Mob.
I'm going to try to help. I'm going to get all my friends to go to that coffee shop. So
thank you, because it's really kind of disgusting what people are doing. And, it's like, even if someone doesn't agree with what Nancy is saying, then boycott her. Why her husband? She has nothing to do with the coffee shop.
Yeah, that's just beyond the pale.
This is what comes with the territory, though. Look, Christina, SPLC is saying you're a men's rights activist. I mean, it's like insane. Like, people are crazy. And I watch these videos of you going to colleges and speaking, and these insane, mentally ill college students that are, wearing a jacket that says woke on the back, and they're trying to scream over you.
But yet they can't even remember their own chant. That was my favorite part
She
of that.
kept looking at her iPhone. She was protesting me leading a flock of students, and she couldn't remember her chants. Activists out there, if you're going to protest a speaker and shut her down, have the self-respect and dignity to memorize your damn chants.
I mean, seriously, how pathetic can you be? Jeez.
All right, Leah. Well, this has been amazing having you.
This has been so awesome.
Thank you for coming on. And yeah, your article is in Tablet.
Yes,
everybody read it.
Read it. You're CEO of Married to the Mob if you want a slightly rude T-shirt. But
thank you. You can follow me on Twitter at Leah McSweeney.
And follow your podcast with Laura Stiles, Improper Edit.
Yes. And also hashtag me neither, the YouTube series.
Oh, yes. Me neither. Right.
Me neither.
Okay. Got it.
Yes.
All right. We're on it.
All right. Thanks you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Go
bye-bye.
have a mocktail.
Okay. Bye.
Or a Shirley Temple.
Double.
A double Shirley Temple.
Are you ready, Boots? Start walking.
Well, I hope you're enjoying the Femsplainers. Why not hang out with us more?
Yes, come socialize with us on social. Find us on Twitter and Facebook at Femsplainers.
And follow our antics inside the studio and out on Instagram and Femsplainer Podcast.
And find us at your favorite podcast hangout. Since joining the E1 network, we are everywhere.
And not just on iTunes and Google Play, but Spotify and other places.
And you can always download new episodes directly at the E1 Podcast homepage or even our own website, femsplainers.com.
And please don't forget to like us before you go.
Or share us with your friends.
We'd love to hear from you. Reach out to us directly via contact@femsplainers.com. And cheers. Here's to our listeners.
Be a Femsplainer.
Well, that was interesting. My goodness, I hope everyone goes to Tablet and looks at the article about the meltdown of the Women's March.
Right. It's just sad because, as we were saying in the discussion, we have seen an incredible surge and organic sisterhood over this past year. And maybe, it's right that the reckoning, 2019, I'm going to call the year of the reckoning, that where we look at, as we've discussed, the overreaches, the men who are overly punished, but without detracting from the real issues underlying that cause this movement.
I know, but what's so extraordinary to me is how anti-Semitism finds its way
into everything.
And
it's the bed bug.
And so now we
discourse.
have like a far right, which blames everything on the Jews.
Right.
And then we have the far left, and they're blaming everything on the Jews, or, a segment of the far left, a segment of the far right.
Well, at least that's traditional, Christina.
It is so traditional. It's kind of a mystery. And it's anti-Semitism is this bizarre conspiracy theory that has survived for centuries.
Right.
And seems to be irresistible. It's tempting to so many groups. At a certain point, the Women's March listed categories of people who were faced oppression and so forth. And the Jews were not mentioned. And yet Jews face the majority of anti-religious.
And anti-Semitism has gone up, especially in the past 2 years.
Yeah.
Like acts of...
And then you see what's happening in Europe, where it's sort of having, it has a bad history.
Right.
And now it's having a comeback.
Right. And as the Jews would say, we've seen this movie before.
We've seen it before. I urge everyone to watch Simon Schama's History of the Jews.
Right.
It's brilliant. It's riveting. And it's very much worth watching.
Okay, so that was paid for by our sponsor, the Elders of Zion.
Yes. We're part of the dark conspiracy.
You know what? When I married David, I said, where is my bank? Where is my media company? Where is that? I thought we control different things. Yeah. Where is that? Okay, moving on. So after the Women's March, we're looking, Christina, this is really your theme.
Yes.
I think we need a men's march, right?
I don't really want a men's march. I mean, men and women are better off getting along. I don't think we're two separate teams competing for a single trophy.
Right. But you have been all over media.
Yes, because
talking about the
American Psychological Association, which is the leading sort of scientific professional organization for psychologists. It has 117,000 dues-paying members. It has produced APA guidelines for the psychological practice with boys and men. Now, I will say there are some reasonable suggestions buried in the report, but it is so weighted, overwhelmed by jargon about male privilege and androcentricity and patriarchy that a reasonable person would just want to run out of the room screaming. It's completely compromised by the silliest kind of gender politics.
Okay, so I read, we're sitting in the studio, you've got the whole study in front of you, like a thick package of paper.
Yeah.
I have the summary. And
you have the propaganda.
I have the propagandish summary, and I have to say, I mean, except for some language here and there, it seemed to me totally reasonable and something you've heard. It's the plot of every movie over the past 30 years. Dad is uptight, or soldier comes back from war, suffers trauma, needs to get in touch with his feelings.
Okay, let's stop right there.
Open up.
Men getting in touch with their feelings. One of the best studies I ever saw was by Amanda Rose. When she wrote it, she was at the University of Missouri. And she and her colleagues looked at about several thousand adolescents and asked them how it felt to talk about your problems. And it turned out there was a huge difference between males and females. It wasn't that they were ashamed to talk about their problems. It wasn't that they felt suppressed. It's just that the girls felt better when they talked it through. And the boys, the number one answer was that it was weird. And that it didn't make them feel better. Not that they were ashamed. And
but this is what they recognize. That
No. She concluded that male stoicism is highly adaptive. And, depression is more common in young women. And depression may actually be synonymous with rumination, where you can't stop thinking about yourself.
Well, except more of these men commit suicide.
But more women attempt it. Men are just more violent, and they do it.
They're more successful.
Yeah, there's like the wage gap. There's a suicide gap because of male.
But here, I think this is true, and I'm not a scientist. I agree.
Yeah,
it is, and we can even call this traditional masculinity. That they are less likely to seek health care when they need it. We know that. Even from our husbands.
Okay, that's true.
They're more likely, wait. They're more often reluctant to admit vulnerability, which is, that's admirable. And they're not saying it's not admirable.
It's not just admirable, it's probably adaptive.
Okay,
we want a bunch of men walking around like,
no, but
I'm so needy and I'm so weak.
No, but they're not saying that. They're just saying they should be open to being more getting the help they need. So when they suffer mental health issues, they're more inclined to drink and smoke too much. And the more masculine identified, and I think that's maybe a class thing. Which was what the association was leaning at. The more woke man is less likely to be putting back whiskeys and smoking cigarettes.
Like Pajama Boy won't have these problems.
No, but I think, look, it's a class thing. They're less likely to seek help. They're more likely to engage in destructive behavior. We were seeing this even in the opioid epidemic. They're less likely to admit they need help. And so I'm looking again at the summary, and that struck me as reasonable, but also way not new.
Way not new. And I'll go further. There were things in this report that I loved. Mm-hmm. They do talk about the importance of fathers. At a certain point, they advise psychologists to help a young man plan out his future and how to find a job. And in fact, that's a brilliant suggestion because employment and being engaged and socially involved is critical to, just male equilibrium. So that's all very good. But then you have things like this on page 10 where they talk about awareness of privilege and the harmful impacts of beliefs about patriarchal power. It's very good for a young man because they're shown to reduce sexist attitudes. Imagine if you had a troubled son or husband or father, and he went to some psychologist who was going to help him overcome patriarchal male privilege.
Yeah, no, that's kind of silly.
It's silly, and this report is just drowning in jargon. There are more mentions of transgenderism than masculinity. So it's focused on a tiny percentage of people at the expense of a vast majority.
Well, I don't know, because I'm reading the propaganda of the press release.
Right.
And they write, they should consider how stoicism and a reluctance to admit vulnerability hamstring men in personal relationships. And they should combat these forces in part by encouraging fathers to engage more fully with their children. Well, this is what we've been saying for years. And they also then had admiring words for positive aspects, which they said courage and leadership. So harmful masculine identities are violence and sexism, but also positive are courage and leadership. So they're at least acknowledging
very reluctantly and very occasionally. Overall, what you take away from this report is that masculinity is a disorder in need of a cure. And you know what? I don't want to give the well-being and health of the men that I love over to activists, agenda-driven, who are captive. This report reads to me, not all of it, but most of it, like it was written by a freshman in gender studies, 101.
Okay, but the good news is well, I guess psychiatrists are all going to read this, but most of us obviously are not.
Psychiatrists are better.
And
they have other problems. They're like,
we know for a fact that men who are married live longer.
Yes.
And why do you think that is, among many of the reasons?
Well, for one thing, their wives make them go to the doctor.
That's what I took away from this report, that there's still a lot about men that
you know what? If the report had been written in that, from that perspective, of concern, a little bit, and I could, if I could edit it and take out all the jargon, there are, as I said, some good suggestions, but this is it actually should be, just exhibit A in the politicization of the social sciences.
Right. We never hear about toxic femininity.
Yeah,
and yet the Women's March is toxic femininity.
It is. Oh,
right?
Boy, is it ever. That'll be our next topic.
That's
toxic
our next
femininity, because it's a real thing.
All right. I think, you know what? I think we better end this here.
We better end it.
Thank you. Welcome to Season 3. We have amazing guests lined up for you. And, we're looking forward to it. Stay with us.
Stay with us. More to come.
Happy New Year. Bye.